would like to introduce myself. I'm Ayla, and I'm at the moment based in Athens, in lockdown Athens at the moment. So first of all, I would like to wish and hope that everyone is well from all the different corners of the world that you're finding yourselves in now in these really difficult and strange times. And I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me to participate as a moderator, and generally for giving me the opportunity to meet up even in this way, which is not the ideal way, of course, but at least it is, we're managing somehow to not feel too alone in these times and to talk about really important issues. So now we're at the final panel that addresses educational inequalities and building solidarities across EU-Turkey borders. So I think this is a very nice ending to the panel to speak about the topic of and the concept of solidarity, and very interesting previous panels. So I'm looking really forward to hearing the presentations and the discussions, and to think how and then to pay attention to the already existing forms of solidarity that exist. I think it's really important to become aware of and to learn from the existing solidarity that move beyond borders, national borders, and that challenge the various categories, national categories that we have been talking about in the previous sessions, and that bring up, pay attention to, help us to imagine and to think of how alternative ways of inclusive education to the already ones that we have heard on the kind of more mainstream institutional forms. So I look forward to this. So we have 4 presentations, but actually presented by 6. We have altogether 6 presenters, which is really nice. So I would like to give the floor without any further delay to the first presenter, Aija. Correct me, I mean, if I make any mistakes anywhere. Aija Polat, right? I hope I'm making it correct. And Aija Polat's presentation is titled "How to Foster Educational Justice and Solidarity Networks Across Borders." And Aija Polat is a professor at the Kiel University of Applied Sciences with a focus on migration and diversity. And as part of her research activities, she has evaluated the concept of supply and care for refugees. So please, go ahead, Aija, and thank you, for taking part in this. Sorry, one last thing, I just forgot. Just for the audience, just as the previous moderators mentioned, if it's possible, if you have any questions, to ask them to place them in the chat box. During simultaneously with the presentations and in between each presentation. And if you have a specific question to a specific presenter, if you could put their name. Thank you. Sorry, Aija.
That's okay. Thank you, Ayla, for introducing me. I'm really happy and grateful to join this conference and to share my ideas with you. And now I'm changing to my presentation so that So I hope that you can see my presentation now. So the title of my presentation is "How to Foster Educational Justice and Solidarity Networks Across Borders." So the idea, the basic idea of my presentation is that the concepts of migration and the concepts of we and they are really important for the educational system, and that the perspective is to think about concepts of migration and concepts of cohesion and living in a heterogeneous society, that these concepts have that they're quite important for ideas of building networks, or that they're also important for the idea of borders or having not borders. So I hope that you can understand the assuming main ideas I have at the end of my presentation. The topics will be Migration and Integration as Metanarratives, Educational Inequality in Germany. Just a brief impact, doing inequality and undoing inequality. So you realize I am speaking really quick, but it's really quite challenging to speak and to make a summary about these issues just in 15 minutes. I try to, but that means that I have to speak a little bit. I hope that you still can understand me. And I will start with the meta-narratives. And then I'm referring and I'm presenting from the German perspective, as I am a researcher and as I am a lecturer in Germany. And what we can realize since centuries in Germany, that the terms migration and integration are huge meta-narratives, and that they are often are used to explain social problems in the society. And also that there, especially in the political discussion, there is not really clear socio-political definition of integration. It is the term integration has a high normative effect within the migration discourse, especially the political discourse. And the failed integration of people with an immigrant background or with a refugee background is a huge reference for the discourses. And these, so narratives about failed integration. Of the education with a migration background, which is also often perpetuated by annual educational reports, focuses on the integration performances of the students with a migration or a refugee background, and the discrepancy to the performance of the students with a migration background. So this lag is often a topic, especially if if there's a new annual educational report. And there's also an interesting study, and I want to make a quote from this study. And this is it's about the topic migration in textbooks. In the books, they use especially in geographical subjects or in politics, and also in history especially. And just a small quote from this study. The study showed that in textbooks analyzed, the problematization of migration prevails over the depiction of diversity as a normal case. In social studies and history textbooks, and to some extent also in geographic textbooks, migration is primarily portrayed as conflict-prone and crisis-ridden. It inevitably leads to socially controversial positions. In this context, migration and diversity ultimately appear only as a problem and challenge for a society that predominantly presented as homogeneous. The opportunity to practice differentiated, reflective, and conscious use of certain terms is not sufficient perceived in textbooks. So this has a huge meaning for the perceiving of migration and for the perspective of migration for students and also for teachers. It is quite prominent if you discuss about educational inequality in Germany, that diversity is still in the trainings of teachers, diversity seems still be irritating, although we are in 2020. And we still have these concepts still in the trainings and in the modules at the university, where diversity at schools are not prominently focused in the modules. So we don't really have to wonder if heterogeneity irritates the teachers at school. And I want to quote now Hagedorn concerning this topic: the fear of multiplicity and difference, which is obviously perceived as disorder, grows, and with it the desire for homogenization and separation. For the context of school, this does not surprise, because school is structurally coded for universalization, homogenization, and has separation. So separation is mainly on focus, and so this is often a reason why we still have to discuss and why we still have to evaluate the educational system in Germany concerning in the topic that we have an inequality in the system. And there's just one table concerning the inequality in the German system, and just want to point out that if you if you compare the results of secondary school and university degrees of immigrants with a Turkish background, this is really an interesting study, then you can see that there's a huge difference concerning the degrees of the students with a Turkish background between Germany, Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Austria, Sweden, or Switzerland, even Switzerland. So it's this table in questions see that in individualization of causes of inequality. So if we see that, so we have to question the thesis that the inequality in the system or the failing of students has individual reasons. So the research about education inequality deals no longer really with the question of whether an education inequality exists, especially in the German system, rather how social inequality is reproduced through education in Germany. So, and there is mainly, you can see that the studies that the focus is on the connection between social origin, educational success, and occupational status. This is often something which can be highlighted. And I want to make a focus now, just if I'm speaking now about doing inequality in the educational system, I just want to point out one thing, and there are many other reasons, but it's, the teacher personality, as we can see and often read, has got a huge impact, is quite important concerning the educational attainment of students and concerning the success of students. And regarding to a report of an expert council of German foundational integration and migration, teaches three students with a migrant background, with a migrant background and low social background differently than their classmates. One explanation for unequal treatment is stereotypical assumptions about what students of different backgrounds are able to do. Such expectations and stereotypical threats have a demonstrable impact on actual student performance. And there's this thesis of the phenomenon of Pygmalion effect. And that means expectations of teachers influence their own behavior and the expectation of their students. And teachers' behavior is influenced by what preferences and dislikes, which abilities, interests, and talents they suspect in the learners. And this can have an impact on their motivation, interest, school performance, and professional choice. I'm quoting these things because I want to shift the perspective, and then I want to highlight how important stereotypes of teachers and how important images and conceptions of teachers in the educational system are for the efforts and for the chances of students to participate and to have success. So, yeah, the practices of recognition from teachers to students or not recognition are so in this perspective constitutive for components of social life and the basis of identity development and self-esteem of individuals. So, and individuals develop their identities and their capacity to act depending on their positions and social structures. So it's really quite important, not only for the development of their identities, also for their real capacity to act and to be involved and to build in self-esteem. So, and the doing of we and they, the doing of othering, so is also part and really an important part of the educational system. Civil rights, like the right to have education, are justified with human rights always. And however, civil rights are only granted to an exclusive group of we or us. So there's a discrepancy. This paradox of democratic legitimacy is supposed to be dissolved by a self-mythologization of the nation state and doing ethno-culturally coded groups and we and they. So we have to, from the political perspective, what I want to say is from the political perspective, and the political perspective is important for the educational system. So they have an impact on the educational system. If you have a problem with the legitimacy of your not giving students with a refugee backgrounds civil rights, like the right to education from the day one in regular schools. So and also if you have the perspective to building up your borders and not to have an open refugee politic, so you have to legitimize these positions, which can, and you have to, in a way, yeah, you have to declare yourself in a way. And so to solve this problem of legitimizing, it's important in this logical way, this political way, to open and point out how important we, and important the borders in thinking and speaking about we and they, and making, doing border in your language and also in your politics. And these doing borders means that you have to mythologize your ethno-culturally coded we. And now I want to point out some theories which from my point of view, are really inspiring and which I want to highlight and which I want to strengthen if in doing working with this series and writing about this series and also talking with you about this series. And I'm quoting now, and I'm referring to Derrida and his idea of law of conditional hospitality. The idea and practice of the nation state based on a certain type of construction of space as territory and of people as the nation ethno-culturally coded we. This is in a deep fundamental crisis under present conditions, what I mentioned before. It's in a crisis practically, functionally, and legitimately, because we have the permeability of borders. This is a fact, and that can only be stopped by intensifying the violence of border security, as we can see in the European border security politics. And instead of an inhuman escalation of this violence at the borders and in the refugee camps, the implementation of a transnational right of self-determination is necessary. And this is for me the law of, and referring to Derrida, the law of unconditional hospitality. And this is can be good combined with the ethic of conviviality, and referring to Gilroy. What does this mean? Convivial culture can be found in emancipatory practices and resistant attitudes in everyday life. These practices are often developed under restrictive living conditions and are excluded or discredited in public discourses. And the ethics of conviviality aims to support such emancipatory practices and to realize modern promises of equality beyond racist attributions and beyond doing otherness and doing we and there. And the idea of the ethic of conviviality can be good combined with the idea of Migrationspädagogik. It's really not so easy to translate it in English, I would like to keep the German words, and I would like to speak in this German word Migrationspädagogik and referring to Paul Metzgerl. This kind of pedagogy includes a critical perspective on nation building and boundary marking practices. It's about overcoming hegemonial knowledges and concepts of nations, ethnicities, affiliations, and self-critical examinations of one's own involvement in the production of inequality. This leads to the following questions for the educational systems. When and in what form are students restricted in their possibilities for action? And which processes of subject formation are taking place under the condition of restriction and discrimination, and which kind of, in what way can I support these subject formations, for example, of students? And in what way is it possible for teachers, actors, and the educational system to change restrictive and discriminatory structures? So these are some of the main questions which, from my point of view, we have to ask concerning the educational system, and which can be good combined with the ethnic of conviviality. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nija, for your presentation and for introducing the concept of pedagogy of migration. I think it was really interesting to hear about it. So now let's move on to the other two presenters, to Fazilet and Janer, right? Okay, great, you got it right. Who both work at Fazilet is a research associate at the Cultural Policy Study Unit of the Istanbul Foundation for Cultural and Arts, and Janer as a project assistant there. So, and they're going to present us the presentation titled The Unifying Power of Arts, Challenges and Prospects for International Collaboration in Arts and Education. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayla, for the introduction. I'll just share my screen for the presentation. And thank you to Joanna and Ellen and the whole conference team for organizing this great conference, and thank you for inviting us. Today with my colleague Jana, we are going to talk about the unifying power of arts in the context of arts education and international collaboration in this field from the perspective of a cultural institution. For those who are not familiar, the Istanbul Foundation for Culture and Arts has been operating in the arts and culture field for 48 years now. The three main objectives of the foundation is to create a continuous interaction between international and local art scene, to contribute to the cultural production in Turkey, and also to contribute to the development of cultural policies in Turkey. And I work as a research associate at Cultural Policy Studies Unit, so I will take the issue from the perspective of advocacy and policy side, and Caner will focus more on the arts programming, for inclusive arts programming side of things. So a brief introduction about the Cultural Policy Studies of İKSV. It's been an area of focus for the foundation in 2010. It makes sense because the foundation has a huge experience and know-how and network in the field of culture and arts. So it knows the needs of the arts and culture scene. So the Cultural Policy Studies Unit tried to turn that knowledge into meaningful data for the development of the cultural field in Turkey. We try to do that in various formats. We publish reports, policy texts, we organize meetings, training programs, we make cooperations, we conduct international projects. So our partners in that are cultural institutions, local authorities, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, NGOs, universities, etc. And the arts education is, of course, is a very important topic of the cultural policy field, but it's also an important field for education policy as well. And it may seem like an advantage, but it's sometimes a disadvantage because neither of the fields are embracing the arts education enough. And when you think about and talk about the inclusive arts education, and you need to add another layer to that social policy side of things. And as a cultural institution, we approach the subject from a basic human rights approach, the rights of everyone to access culture, to participate in the culture, and we advocate for that basically, and arts education is a part of that. It's a basic human right as well. And how do we do that advocacy? And we do it through research. To this day, we have published 8 cultural policy reports on focusing on different topics, and 3 of them were directly related to the arts education and cultural pluralism. We work with academics, experts in these fields to publish, to prepare this research, and we publish it and we share with all public. We put it on our website in English and Turkish. And in 2014, we published a report on titled Rethinking Arts Education in Turkey with Dr. Dulay Fatlıoğlu from Ohio State University. In that, we focus on the educational structure in Turkey regarding the arts education. And we, after drawing a picture of the current situation, we try to give some solid recommendations for the relevant actors in the field, including Ministry of Education and Ministry of Culture and Tourism. And in 2018, we published a report on fostering cultural pluralism through the arts. We work with Dr. Kim Reigel and Dr. Feyzi Baban from Wilfrid Laurier and Trent University, and in that report we focused on the role of the arts to foster cultural pluralism. How can it create a harmony between host communities and newcomers? How can it foster a better experience of living together? So we want to emphasize that role of the arts. And last year for our 8th report, we did a research on about entitled From Early Childhood to Youth, Growing Up with the Arts. For that report, we worked with Professor Feyza Çorapçı from Boğaziçi University, and with that report, we discussed the issue from a developmental psychology point of view, and looked at how arts can contribute to a child in different developmental stages. So we looked at the issue from a psychology point of view, and we try to convey how arts can make positive contributions for disadvantaged children on so many topics, including social skills, confidence skills, etc. And while we're advocating these issues, we're also, of course, trying to transform ourselves as a foundation to be more inclusive. And we were lucky to open up a space in 2019. It's a very inclusive, participatory space for a disadvantaged group of people. So I'll give the floor to Caner to talk about İKS ve alt kat.
Thank you, Fazilet. Now, as Fazilet said, I will talk about İKS ve alt kat, learning and interaction space. Actually, alt kat is mean ground floor in Turkish. We selected this name because this space you can see in the picture is located in the ground floor of our foundations building. And İKS ve alt kat Learning and Interaction Space was founded by the Istanbul Foundation for Culture and Arts with the aim of improving access to and participation in arts and culture events, and it has opened its in March 2019. İKSV Altkat presents event and workshop programs in various disciplines year-round and free of charge. It aims to directly reach children, youngsters, and rural groups with limited access to arts and culture, while reinforcing the communication between art and culture professionals, NGO workers, artists, educators, and viewers. As well as specially organized events in conjunction with the foundation's sphere of activity, İKSV Altkat sets up new collaborations between the fields of arts and culture and education and organizes capacity building programs. We can move to the next one. Yes, thanks. In order to increase accessibility to culture and arts events and support cultural diversity, creative workshops for children and teenagers are organized at İKSV Altkat with the support of Istanbul Development Agency and UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. As part of these workshops launched in March 2019, children and teenagers with limited access to cultural and arts events from various districts of Istanbul have been provided with the opportunities to improve their creativity in various fields of arts. Refugee children and teenagers from NGOs working with UNHCR Turkey as a partner has participated in many different workshops, and children from different regions of Istanbul and from different NGOs had been in all these workshops too. In this way, it was ensured that children produce together in an inclusive environment. For example, in one of our workshops called Istanbul Tales Writing and Storytelling Workshop, Turkish, Kurdish, Armenian, and refugee children worked together. They create a common language through art within this workshop process. We can move to the other one. Thanks. As I told before, of course, all these workshops and events are not only held with the support of local institutions, but also we organize them in cooperation with international organizations such as UNHCR and Bernard van Leer Foundation, or with cultural centers of European countries. In fact, the main goal of all these funding and collaborating institutions is to reach more and more children and young people, but in a big city like Istanbul, it is not easy to reach hundreds of children at the same time due to the transportation problems and children's ongoing school processes. On the other hand, conducting a longer-term workshop with a certain number of participants is more productive for them and can produce more permanent results for them. For this reason, we have paid attention to long-term workshops with refugee children and young people. In this way, we enabled them to socialize more easily, make friends from different neighborhoods, and actually be a part of a process of art production. Even thanks to these workshops we held, children and young people realized artistic events and exhibited them to the audience at İKSV's international festivals and have a chance to be a part of these international events. We can move to the next one. İKSV Altkat also aims to support art education by facilitating cooperation between artists and instructors, thus expanding its sphere of influence and increasing its sustainability. Many local and foreign experts from the field of culture and arts and education come together by these seminars, talk series, and training programs held by İKSV Altkat. In all these events, the topics of inclusive arts education and working with refugee children and youth took an important place. Exemplary projects in these areas are shared, experiences are conveyed, problems are revealed, and solutions are sought altogether in these events. At the most fundamental level, it is very important to cooperate with international institutions in terms of reaching international resources and participants from abroad. And we can move to last one. Thank you. And finally, I would like to talk about another international partnership project of İKSV Altkat. Actually, İKSV Altkat assumes the coordination of the project titled Early Childhood Development and Culture and Arts, which has been carried out by İKSV and with the support of the Bernard van Leer Foundation. Within the scope of this project, children's books have been published as part of Foundation's festivals and biennials. The books published in Turkish, English, and Arabic distributed for free. And these books are also sent to NGOs, culture and arts and education institutions working with refugee kids in various cities around Turkey. Moreover, various workshops and reading activities are held in connection with the children's book. And thanks to all these books and events, refugee children and young people are able to participate in the cultural and art activities around them, actually. Now, at the end of our presentation, Fazilet will briefly talk about our work during the pandemic process.
Thank you, Caner. Of course, the pandemic has created a serious challenge for the field of culture and arts. Many organizations' activities came to a halt. İKSV alt activities continued. Some of them continued online, but there were some challenges because refugee disadvantaged groups of kids couldn't reach these online activities because they didn't have, tablets, mobile phones, etc. And at that point, UNHCR, for example, provided them with tablets for, for them to be able to participate in the programs. In the projects that Caner mentioned, international collaborations actually made it both enabled projects to be realized, and on the other hand, expanded the working area of these organizations. Like Bernard van Leer Foundation was never really before funded an arts and culture project, but the social impact of arts is actually so strong that it needs to be emphasized, and international collaborations from various fields on that would be very beneficial. And during the COVID, of course, it's a challenge to do that, and we published in April a policy text entitled "The Uniting Power of Arts and Needs of the Cultural Field During the Pandemic." We emphasized the role of culture and arts as a great uniting and healing power for a community, that it is an essential part of our life. It's not a luxury or something beyond our essential needs. So we wanted to emphasize that, and we wanted to talk. There's the cultural field in Turkey needs to be supported by various actors, because it's already financially vulnerable situation, and the pandemic has brought the cultural and arts activities to a halt, so it needs to be supported. And that social impact of the arts needs to be continuously advocated and emphasized, and international collaborations are a great way of doing that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation and for introducing us to the work of İKSV, the work that you're doing there at İKSV, and the unifying power of art, the challenges that this field is facing now with the current pandemic. Okay, so we move on to the next presentation to Beril and Birte, whose presentation is titled Negotiating Perspectives, Understandings and Practices Around Inclusion and Non-Formal Education, the Challenge of Building Common Grounds in Times of Deepening Inequalities. So I'm looking forward to listening to this presentation. Just a small introduction. Beril is currently working with Anadolu Kultur and has been coordinating the GermanTurkish initiative for collaboration on refugee relief since 2017. And Birte is a project coordinator for the GermanTurkish initiative for collaboration on refugee relief, where she develops resources to strengthen solidarity, multilingualism, and cultural heritage. Thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hello again, everyone.
Hi, also from my side, I'm Birte. Ellen and Jonna, we'd first like to thank you for organizing this really amazing conference and for having us today. And also thank you to all the colleagues and friends we are seeing in this panel. Before we get started with the presentation, we'd like to point out that English is neither Beryl's nor my first language. We always try to be aware of possible discrimination and speak as inclusively as possible, but if we unintentionally hurt someone or someone feels offended, please let us know on the chat or later on via email. Today we're going to present you our German-Turkish initiative for collaboration on refugee relief, which is a project funded by Stiftung Mercator. And we will focus on the process of negotiating our perspectives and also on the challenges of building common grounds. But before we dive deeper into the topic, Beryl will give you a short insight what the project is about in general.
Thank you, Birte. So this collaboration, the idea has arisen in 2015 when this cross-border forced migration reached an unprecedented level. So what we did was the idea is to gather German and Turkish social civil actors together to learn and address the challenges for increasingly diversified learning environments. So you see, this is an international and local collaborative inquiry to find common challenges. We create materials to respond to needs. We both support professionals and children for more inclusive learning environments, and the overall aim is related to social cohesion. So with these calling questions in the first round, we gathered more than 40 organizations from Germany and Turkey, and from formal and non-formal education, teachers, social workers, artists, and academics. And we came up with 6 different tools, as you see, mostly based on games, dance, music, arts education, and also self-reflection for teachers. And all these tools, they are for direct use with children. And when we say with children, we mean children with and without refugee background together. And all the tools are practical enough not to require any expertise or any extra materials. And in the second round now, we are mostly focused on capacity building of the trainers. So with this calling question, now we work with 18 different organizations from different localities again. And we recently formed our working groups on 5 different teams, which are trans and multilingualism, storytelling as an alternative pedagogy, digital and remote collaboration with children and families, inclusive arts education, and awareness of intersectional discrimination and privileges. So as you can imagine, in this big network, we are working remotely right now. So I will leave the floor to Birte to go on the flow a bit.
Exactly. Let's take a quick closer look on our presentation's main focuses today. What made our work so special was that it was trans-professional collaboration, and we had a plurality of perspectives, which were quite demanding to work with, but also very, very enriching. Due to the time limitation today, we can only give you first insights, but we will be happy to answer questions if there's some occur later on in the Q&A session. And I would like to get started actually with the meaning of the language in the context of negotiating perspectives. Because in both project rounds, language played such an important role for various reasons. And despite so many differences between the countries, one of the really common points was that multilingual learning environments, although in different ways and political loads, are still not encouraged much. So therefore, multilingualism is a crucial point for us to work with, also, or maybe especially when creating a common language in this project. And as many other projects did and do, and due to our personal experiences, we thought of using English as our main working language. But during the working process, and just at the very beginning, we realized that people do not have to speak English to be able to reach international networks and reach the opportunity to learn and create together. Still, from our experiences, people might feel some pressure to pretend speaking this language because English is often presented as the norm when it comes to international collaborations, work, traveling, academic research, or conferences. And this pressure already leads to various layers of exclusion. But we need really to remember that not in every country or region, English is seen as the most important foreign language to learn. So we cannot expect from everyone that they had the privilege to learn and practice a second or third language and be fluent enough in it to verbalize themselves in deep conversations. We do not want to support or sustain this inequality by keeping our international collaboration doors open for English-speaking participants only, also leaving aside the question, why is it English and not any other language spoken by billions of people being the norm? As our project also aims to emphasize that all languages in learning spaces should be appreciated, valued, and included, as we think that all language skills are resources for children to be able to participate and learn together. And actually these different languages can also be resources for learning a target language, such as German or Turkish. But unfortunately, the most common perception of integration and inclusion is often equal to speaking the national or official language of the country. So therefore, our concept seems to be somehow contrary to the main discourse or practices in educational systems. But still, we want to walk our talk. Therefore, we agreed on more than 1 or 2 working languages, just to give everyone the chance to verbalize themselves in a way that they can express their intentions, their emotions, their ideas, and also conflicts in a way as they wish or feel comfortable with. And one solution for us is inviting them to speak in a language of their choice. And by this wording, we try to raise awareness and give space for the personal skills, but not limit them to German if they come from Germany, for example. Still, of course, German and Turkish are still the mostly requested languages in our project, but also Arabic or Kurdish Comanche, as well as English, less often, but still are present. And everyone could always bring in something more if they wish to. And by this practice, we actually try to increase the feeling of acceptance and belonging, because these feelings lead us to being more inclusive and questioning the non-inclusive norms. When trying to work more inclusively by including all languages, another level of challenge is the time. Actually, it needs a lot of patience and change of working structures and expectations towards the collaboration. We mostly use consecutive translation, which is quite time demanding, but it also gives us more time to digest and to really harvest what we have heard or learned. And by working with the same small group of translators each time, they become a strong part of our network and also get a good feeling for the terminology of the collaboration and the context in general. Still, physical and digital interaction changes everything about the language so significantly. For example, in physical meetings, especially in excursions or during socializings, people will offer their translation to each other in order to understand the differences or the subtle meanings of terms in their contexts. Body language and embodied presence actually were also a critical part of creating a common ground. And now that we are mostly limited to digital collaboration, also having in mind that a lot of us have this so-called Zoom fatigue, the communication tends to stay more formal and it's more taking turns instead of organically emerging rhythms, and the meetings mostly stay aim-focused. So this missing time and mood for socializing will probably heavily influence our shared experiences and the know-how that we can collect together.
And another level of building a common language would be, of course, exploring terminology. Throughout this project, we inevitably revisit and revise our concepts, vocabularies, terminologies, due to this rich encounter and working together. So at one level, in the first round of the project, we realized that at a very practical level, we were quite late in realizing that a term like social worker meant so different sets of skills, needs, and related organizations in Germany and Turkey. And if you want to create a tool to target this this profession, you need to know better what they are. So we think one solution is always to go to the field together, to practice together, like activities with trainers and with children. And this will make more shared experiences turn into from words into life, where we can collect more trust, build stronger bonds, which would lead to deeper discussions and really hearing one another, and most importantly, maybe creating this collective thinking strength. Another level would be when we work with, let's say, more contentious, controversial concepts like inclusion and integration, as we did today, discrimination, identity, and maybe privileges. So here I will give an example. One of our tools called Dancing Matters. This is a program for children over 12, and it's about the dance heritage, its relation with migration. So young people's identities, agency, and memory is very much at stake in the program. Salah, you see here, is telling in one of these videos where he's teaching also the basic dance steps. There is this sentence from him, getting more in-depth relation with other cultures and other identities will not harm your identity, he says. And with our participant organizations and implementers in the field, we discuss this a lot. Is identity something fluid and always in change in the interaction with the other, or it is something to hold on to or not to lose in order to assert and fight against existing, let's say, discriminatory dominant mechanisms? So what we did is to bring this discussion into the classroom to be able to discuss with the youngsters, and we would work on training the trainers how to host this participatory or fruitful discussion with young people, to invite them for more inquiry, for more questions, instead of having clear answers about what is identity, like the multiplicity of identity in one person or plurality of it in a social body, for example. So these terminology discussions are very crucial part of this journey.
But when we're talking about negotiating perspectives and understandings, this does not just refer to the communication between the participants, but also to our self-positionings. All outputs of the project aim to support a more diversity-sensitive and discrimination-aware environment, which also requests from us or from the facilitators a lot of self-reflection, self-repositioning around topics such as socialization, such as power structures or hierarchies, prejudices. So actually it begins with also questioning the structural level of projects. Like, we're always talking about working with and not for a specific target group, but still when it comes to including the main actors, in this example, for example, like refugees themselves or the organizations that they initiated, they usually stay out of the NGO networks. And the reasons behind this can be quite diverse. One question could be who receives fundings and why? What are the well-rooted hierarchical perspectives embedded in the project designs from funders? And we also really need to become aware of our own working mechanisms, attitudes and behaviors, which are or were not always inclusive enough to reach out and collaborate like on an eye-to-eye level with the people that we actually want to work with and not just for. On personal levels, we also have to negotiate our positionings. In the project, we had the chance to evaluate our perspectives, also self-declared intercultural competences, or our social positionings and their influences onto our collaboration. For example, we had a German participant who was really struggling as she was always very impatient during discussions, and she didn't understand why we always have to debate so long and can't easily decide between some options. Sometimes she was also struggling with not being able to follow a certain conversation when Turkish was the most spoken language at the table. Later on, she was reflecting on these internalized positions and started embracing the chaos, as we call it in our project. But also, apart from the troubles of working inclusively within our groups, she really realized how limited her perspective on Turkey and Turkish people was. She herself stated that due to missing representation of the Turkish people in her everyday life or educational system, her connotation about them was really limited to mostly taxi drivers or local fruit shops. And this internalized image or connotation really limited her ability to fruitfully participate in this process of collaboration in our projects. Of course, similar experiences can also occur for participants coming from just different regions within the same country. I would like to go on with, instead of focusing on the language, also on negotiating practices. We would like to take a look at negotiating practices a bit in the broader context, because we often see distinctions between our geographies in, for example, governmental structures, inequalities in distribution of resources, accessibilities, different approaches, attitudes, as a result of many entangled systems. And again, we try to practice what we preach, and therefore we try to focus on resources and similarities, let's say communal relations, inequalities, or other diverse levels of institutional discrimination or asymmetries in opportunities. But for us, it is critical to work on acknowledging, exploring, and reflecting on differences, because this also means to understand the links and interdependencies between them. Still, we try to harvest the common ground out of them and try to tackle the common skills needed for trainers or for children, and see which tools could be useful for both contexts. Maybe as an example, dropouts from schools or educational systems. In Turkey, school dropouts are a huge problem, and it's very much linked to child labor, which is a violation of children's rights, which is also a problem strongly related to precarious working situations or poverty. In Germany, of course, we also have school dropouts, but the reasons for them might be different. Some might also overlap compared to Turkey. But what our participants did is they tried to harvest a common challenge, which is the difficulty how to reach out to these school dropouts or educational system dropouts, and how to make these children and families be kept in this educational system. When we negotiate our practices, we also feel that we always have to be in a constant exchange with the field, actually taking a look at our time on this. It's just important to be aware of the differences in the context and structures, which is not a task to be done one at a time, but an attitude to maintain throughout the whole project process, before, during, and after. We have some solutions for this, or some practices, how we make sure that whatever we develop always matches the needs in the field. Better, up to you.
Okay, so as Birte mentioned, we are constantly discovering changing differences in conditions, of course, also in inequalities. So in our network, we come up with this question, okay, what could be the tools that can serve as a common ground, as in our headline, as a common ground to serve these differences of needs. And our working process in both rounds actually led us to some common, let's say, answers. These tools would be mostly games, arts, and stories. They are identified by our participants as powerful tools to host many different levels of senses, cognitions, also conflicts and resolutions maybe at the same time, negotiations for meanings and inquiries. So these tools appear as our common working ground. However, as we all know, these tools can be also exclusionary at many different aspects. However, they are perfect, let's say, areas and fields to deepen, to open up, and to extend to reach a more inclusive educational, let's say, possibilities and alternative pedagogies. Of course, we need to say arts practices, games, stories, they cannot be the answer for the problem of social justice, for the problem of not inclusive, let's say, education systems. But the most important thing is that they become catalysts for more engagements, more lived experiences for children and their trainers and caregivers or trainers. the need to adaptation also comes from the fact of the diversity of the circumstances. Okay, we work with common tools, but we need to adapt them to make them responsible for national but also regional differences in circumstances, unequal, let's say, opportunities, access to education. So what we do is we gather what our participant organizations bring from their localities as sometimes subchapters, sometimes as adaptations, different versions for these tools. The need of adaptation actually can be based on many different dynamics. For example, contrasting state policies, or who can we reach with these tools, children, age groups, or the group sizes. I want to give one more example from the project through a tool. This is a multilingual memory game, and we implemented this game more intensely in formal education contexts in Germany. We implemented with teachers, also in the classrooms, and we always add an aspect that would make the teachers, let's say, motivated to use these tools in their classroom. So in Germany, this aspect was mostly teaching the target language, teaching Turkish, teaching German. So more, for example, games on grammars were added in the tool. However, in Turkey, the responsibility of teaching Turkish is on central government. So no civil society actor can be using their own tools for teaching language. So we shifted to other skills, storytelling with multilingual words and inputs from children, for example. And in Turkey, you need to be more flexible for the tools to be implemented in different levels. So we left blank pages in the booklet of this game for the teachers to write their own ideas and to make the tool available and useful for their learning outcome, whatever it is. So we try to invite the creativity of the teachers. We try to make the tools more diverse with more ideas, and we always keep them open for use and open for collective contribution.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know how much time I have.
Sorry, I think we have to wrap it up to go to the last presentation, because we're running out of time.
Yes. Okay, I will then ask the audience.
Maybe
ask the audience to speak about these topics for deepening inequalities in the Q&A.
So sorry about this. Okay,
Yeah,
so we move on to thank you very much for the presentation. Really much. So we move on to the last presentation, to Saraya Gomis, whose presentation is titled Interlinking Activism Against Racial Discrimination on the Structural, Institutional, Individual Level. The example of Each One Teach One, a community-based education and empowerment project in Berlin. And Saraya teaches and learns and is an honorary member of the board at Each One Teach One. Thank you very much. Saraya. Sorry, can you unmute yourself so we can?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I only will share one page of the website, and then speak, and try to keep it a little bit short so that we have time for the discussion. So I talk about Each One Teach One. The term Each One Teach One was coined in the context of Black anti-racism and resistance movements, and the term points to lack of access to formal education in the era of slavery and colonialism, and the need to pass knowledge on within Black African families and communities. And this Each One Teach One is a community-based education and an empowerment project in Berlin, and works also on structural development of the agency and prevention of racism for example, people of African descent, Black people, etc. And the NGO was founded in 2012, but they had no rooms. They had only books. And then in 2014, they had achieved to have a little funding to have 2 rooms in Wedding. This is a area in Berlin who is also the so-called African Quarter, and is linked also to colonialism, colonial aspiration, not only in colonial times, but also in the era of National Socialism and dictatorship. And so we had these 2 little rooms in Wedding by chance, and I was joining the NGO also in 2014, 2 months after the opening, because as a teacher I was conquering the city with my students, and the library was one of the locations we visited and we learned in, and etc. And so many of my students, also Black students, aimed for different kind of education due to the discrimination within school books, etc. And so I worked with different groups of different students, for example, the Black students at EOTO, and then became also part of the NGO. And first of all, it was this kind of library, also with cultural events, readings, poetry slams, etc. But then the youth coming, and more youth coming, and also bringing their cousins and other students they met. So this became one of the working points for EOTO, and all this in this kind of library-centered space. Because also working with children and young people within the library was a so huge impact on their wish to read or learn, that we decided also that this would not be one youth project apart from the library, because normally in the library in Germany you are quiet. And this so this changed when we started, because also we had only 2 rooms. And we had approximately around 2,500 books due to Vera Haya. She was an Afro-German woman who began to collect the works of Afro-diasporic and African authors, films, newspapers, Black topics in the 70s. And one of our archives is named after her. But since then, our library grew considerably, because also other donators like Eleonora Wiedenthal-Coulibaly or Ricky Reiser, mostly women, was giving donations. And now we have over 8,000 books, but we have also different archives in our library, like archive which is named Sankofa BRD and Sankofa GDR, so which explores the history of Black and African people in the 2 different German states. And so also the archives and the library are primary sources on Black German history, and also offers writing saloons with young writers, also youngsters who aim to write or becoming a writer, but also concerning lifestyle, activism, fashion, poetry, everything what the young people wants to approach. We also have different kind of projects that sometimes die because young people move or they begin to study, and so their project that they invented are slowly dying, but then new projects arise, and mostly from the wish of the young people. But we have also steady kind of projects. I will talk about this a little bit later, but first of all, we also have anti-discrimination counseling and social counseling. That's important also for our youth work, because when you are in school and you face discrimination or you face so many social problems, then it's not so likely that you have huge capacities to follow the school, doing your homework, etc. So we have also interlinked these two kinds of counseling, and so young people can come and have also sorts of advice, for example, when it comes to racism, discrimination, residence, criminal laws, drug problems, problems with their families, racial profiling, etc., etc. And then also from the social counseling, there's always a project that will come from these kind of counseling, because then we know, okay, this might be some things that the young people of African might need, or they are directly talking about what they wish that we do. So then we are offering tutoring, so steady tutoring, but also when it comes to the big exams, then we are trying to help the young people coming to us, and then we have workshops like normal social work stuff, what is called EOTO's building time, and then also we have some open meetings, regular open meetings like the Black Youth Fridays, and there's also chilling, hanging out, but also discussing actual problems, or then also the youngsters coming there express their needs, what they want, or if they want to do their own projects. We have also many young people doing their own projects and only using EOTO as space. And then we have also for young people the network inclusion leaders. So we, due to COVID, this was not happening this year. So that's these are annual training courses for young people, but not only Black people, but also POC and people who are interested in becoming or achieving leadership positions or something like this. And then also, due to all our fields that we are working in, we are, and because all the living conditions of Black people are directly determined by political decisions, we also do much political work, not only for the interest of people of African descent, but we also look always to where are the intersections with other communities, and also our communities are always in the plural, because we have all kinds of religions, even when people might not think to people of African descent when they're talking about Jewish people, for example, or we have a huge LGBTIQ community, so we have also a queer youth space, etc., etc. So they are Black, Romney, and Sintitse. So we are, intersected in many different communities. but also on a EU level. So we organized, I think it was 2 years ago, the PED Week, the People of African Descent Week in the European Parliament. So we met all kinds of different African descent groups in Europe. And also then we had the PED Week Germany, because we also aim, because of the intersections we have, it's hugely important for us to always point out that we are one of many, many organizations, and that if we want to go far, we always need to get together, go together. And so also on social media, etc., we try to advertise other organizations and also have many, many panels and also closed kind of talks about different kind of problems we have. For example, anti-Black racism within Asian communities and anti-Asian racism within Black communities, etc., etc. So we try to work all this out, and also try to work out why sometimes solidarity within us is so difficult, because of funding strategies, because government always like to talk only to one organization, etc., etc. So we always try to work in, to be in a good contact, and also to take on the criticism some other organizations have on us. So we have regular tables concerning our work. And we don't do also a lot of cultural work also with youngsters, like Afrolution festivals, and trying also to do what the government is not doing for us, because like we heard in the first presentation, where we have some data for people of African descent, also in education, there's not much of data. So we did the Afro census. This is an online survey to initiate to PED people to share their situations, to share their life realities, their experiences, and we will have the first results within some months. And I try to stop there, because I see the time is almost over, so I would like to have an open discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Saraya, for your presentation. I'm checking now at the chat box to see the questions. I think. Before we move on to the discussion by Albert, so I just see a question here that is actually to all panelists and attendees. So I think you can probably also, read it. So maybe this can be addressed to all of you if you can have some quick reflections, especially the two last questions that are more related to the topic of this panel. So so the question goes, why do you think intersectional discrimination education is something that should be dealt with and tackled in an inter-transnational context? And what are the benefits from a stronger networking between political civil society actors, researchers in the EU and Turkey? And how can we foster such solidarity networks? What should we strive for? So this is a very open, but maybe you can relate it a bit more specifically to your work, and especially thinking in the kind of context and the specific location. I think is important also that this conference has been addresses, and particularly this panel, like the EU Turkey borderlands, let's say. How, in this kind of very intense and severe bordered reality, and it has been intensified with the pandemic, and as was mentioned in some of the previous panels, all these multiple crises that somehow turn different groups of people against each other. How do you see or emerging solidarities, or how can solidarity in itself become a kind of tool that we should be actively engaging in and striving for in itself. And yeah, this would be my kind of like addition to this. Yeah, so maybe if whoever wants to say something, like some kind of more like conclusory reflections on this, conclusory words before we move on to the discussion.
I can try to give a brief answer. I mean, it's enough from my perspective. I mean, we are speaking with our students often about international social work and about transnationalities, and we are also speaking about post-colonialism and, of course, about intersectionality. And as main reason, and it's really the intersectional perspective gives us a huge chance to analyze the topics, a huge topic of inequality and different areas from the intertwining aspects of inequality and in a really good way. So it's really in my topics, in my models and in my working and writing plays really an important role. And also the topic of transnationality. And I just want to, if we speak about that and if you write about that, so it's really important that we underline these aspects of working together. But it's sometimes it's easier to speak about this and it's harder to practice it. So I think these kind of networking, these kind of having an exchange with this conference is really great, and I'm sure it was hard to organize this conference, but I think it's a good chance to have an exchange about ideas and to also get in contact with each other and to describe our positions and our experiences which we are making. So this is a good starting point, and I just want to say, to speak about that and to have an exchange have a really an important role for me if we want to overcome hegemonial ideologies, and also the national materialism. So it's important to overcome these kind of paradigms and to overcome these kind of perspectives. And this can only be possible if we intertwine our perspectives and if we have an exchange about. And if we also, and this will be in an ideal way, if we also find a way to work together or to support each other. So,
may I try to build on Aicha's point?
Because we have one more question that I forgot to from
very
above.
quickly.
Very
quickly. I will just.
Thank you.
I would like to say that. To work cross borders like international networks will first make us to see the links between the levels of inequalities in one location and how it is related to the privileges in another location, and in a cross-border way. We would be first aware, this act of noticing again, but not by reading, but living in big networks, how this inequality operates. So beyond this awareness, we can, for example, in our project, use multilingualism as a power, I guess. For example, we put seeds in different locations for more inclusive education. Let's say we are trying to open the field for inclusive education, but how these seeds will speak to one another, how they will put roots maybe below the soil, like the plants who are speaking to each other, can collaborate. We add English, German, Arabic, Farsi, and Kurdish to the tools, which means that our tools, for example, could be used in Lebanon, but also in Greece and in Germany. So it could be one point to make these networks operate collectively through what they offer to the field.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, you wanted to say something also, I think, to this?
Yeah, from a point of view of a teacher, I think this is in these times where my classroom is diverse, having different experiences, having different point of a reference within the world, many, not only two, but sometimes 4 or 5 point of references. So this is absolutely normal to work within these intersections. This couldn't be otherwise, because when we are in history, for example, so we are always trying to add something to the national German curriculum from the point of a global history, from the experiences we have from our informal education. We add different languages, also because this, if they add different languages, so ultimately, I am a learner, because if I don't know the language which is spoken in the classroom, so they have to translate, they have to explain, etc., etc. So this is absolutely, yeah, normal in my kind of view on education, and also how we work together in the classroom. And also when it comes to the work outside of school, it's the same. So if I do a project with another country, yeah, there are so many different layers, and also in our community, because of colonialism, there's much more and much more layers. So for sure, it's always about the intersections, and also to grow in this kind of more complex world. Because first of all, we always, it seems some kind of easy, okay, I was discriminated against, etc., etc., and then it becomes more and more and more complex, and these complexes, yeah, this complex system makes all of us in the classroom much more aware of power systems, of the questions, how can I contribute to build another kind of society? What should I do in my workplace? What will be when I study, etc., etc.
Okay, I think I will move on to the second question, so we can finally close with the discussion. So the question is, does the official idea of integration include the dynamic element migrants should integrate to the society, and the society communities should learn how to live with its new members?
Well, I could react to the question if it's okay. Well, first I would say there is not one official idea of integration, because the concept of integration is contested in itself, and there are different political ideas of what integration does mean, should mean, might mean. Well, Aisha Pollard, he gave a certain view on integration, which means it's the expectation to adopt to the norms, to the rules, to the habits of the society. But if you look a bit closer to the debate in the scientific discussion, well, there is a distinction between cultural adaptation and integration, because integration means to get access to the central institutions of society, to get access to education, to legal work, to political representation, and to gain the same rights as the citizens, or the older citizens, or the classical have. Now, so you can translate integration into full membership as a citizen of a society. And therefore the question is, how do we imagine or think about the role of refugees, of immigrants, of autonomous people within society? Is always the debate about how do we think about integration. And I would add another aspect. Well, if I look at my empirical research in the last years, about refugees in Germany is the strongest wish of refugees is to integrate themselves into society, to get a legal residential status, to get access to education, to get access to paid work, and so on. So I would not be too critical in a general way on the concept of integration, but would say, well, we have to think clearly and articulate clearly what do we mean when we speak about integration, because disintegration, exclusion cannot be the answer, it's the alternative. And a certain degree of social cohesion is needed within every society. You can say, well, we appreciate a lot of languages. That's true, as Saraya Gomez just said. We work with respect and work with a multiplicity of languages, but we need one common language to allow some kind of communication. If you had people who only speak Chinese in your class, other people who speak only Russian in your class, it would be very hard to establish some common ground of communication. So I would say, well, we shouldn't give up the idea that living together means building up some common ground of means of communication, a common ground of shared values. Well, if we all accept the idea of human rights, we have a big common ground, but right-wing extremists do not share the common ground. So how do you communicate with a hardcore racist and right-wing extremist? So to give up the idea of integration is, for my opinion, not the solution. But we should clearly make a distinction between adaptation and integration, and stress that integration may be able to act in a society, be respected as a member with all the rights everyone should have. And that is the debate which is a debate within German politics, in international politics, in social sciences.
Okay, great, thank you. No, because the person who asked this question is just clarifying. I think you can all read, right, as panelists, right, what is being clarified. So she's saying that I asked this because in Finland, this is the official idea, yet it is not implemented in institutional practices. It was more a question about policy, just to so the audience can hear also. And
may I add, maybe, because I like this kind of term, common ground. I think this should be the focus, because when we have this kind of definition, working on a common ground is the work of everyone in the society, everyone. If you are here from ages, or if you're just arrived 2 days ago, or if you, I don't know, working on this kind of common ground, and it's always renew, because we have new learnings. Oh, now they're coming with their anti-discrimination stuff, so I have to learn all this stuff. Okay, now I can't say anymore this kind of word. So it's a process for everyone in the society trying to find the common ground. And I wanted to add to this, because I really like this kind of word much more than integration was always framed, in my experiences, also in school, and I'm talking, it's framed in a racist kind of, I always, as teacher, I always experienced integration talks really, really racist, and it was really hard. And also all this kind of engagement in NGOs, working with a different kind of teachers, doing community research things. All this engagement was only to still be able to be a teacher, because it's so hard to be part of the system and still look in the mirror. So you have to deal with, So I really like it. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have maybe one more question from the audience that concerns the notion of common language involved by the presentation of Janer. Could you please explain this a bit more? And
I have actually written the answer right
Sorry.
now, but yeah, but I can't say that. Of course, all the children and teenagers use their own languages in the workshops, and mainly they know Turkish. But even if they don't know Turkish and can't communicate in Turkish, they create a common language through art. They draw something, they act, they use their gestures and mimics, and they create a common language in that way. And of course, in within the whole process, actually, they started to learn their language too. So you can listen 3 or 4 different languages in just in a one workshop, and they know all each other's language. They start to learn their words actually.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think we can move on to the discussion to finalize this panel. So we're moving on to Albert Scher, who is a professor and chair of the Department of Sociology at the University of Education in Freiburg in Germany. Okay, so.
Okay, I will try to give a short comment. Was pleased to give a comment, and having listened to the panel, for me it's some kind of difficult to give inspiring and intelligent comment, and I will shortly explain the reason. My impression was that all contributions showed very different approaches to the question, how can we build up a more social just, more inclusive societies, and what are pedagogical means, measures of social work and empowerment to forward this idea of social justice, anti-discrimination, or I would say human rights. But that's a very general thing which all the contributions have in common. If I try to understand a little bit closer the different contributions, my impression was they showed that different attempts to react to different situations in different societal contexts. And that make a big difference. So for me, it's not really clear what we have in common as a share of what should be reached by pedagogical, political, or social work means, and what are differences in our understanding, how we imagine ourselves, how a good, a decent, a just society could be desired. And I think we would need much more time and take a closer look into different approaches to understand what they have in common and what are the open or perhaps more or less hidden differences in our understanding of the idea of society, of pedagogical measures and pedagogical idea. Second remark is, I think the contributions have shown that initiatives in this civil society can successfully make a contribution to what Michel Lamont, an American sociologist, called cosmopolitanism from below, meaning building up a society not from top down, from political measures, but from below. And cosmopolitanism from below means breaking down barriers and boundaries that are the consequence of nationality and citizenship, of racism and discrimination. I think one core element is, for this is activities that facilitate encounters between people of different origins and affiliations, rather where they can meet as individuals who work on a common goal and not meet as members of national, racial, religious, or ethnic collectives or groups. And we have a big scientific research about that, working together at a common goal in an atmosphere which is defined by respect and mutual understanding, is very helpful to overcome prejudice and to breaking down national, ethnic, racial, racist barriers. So it's undoubtedly true that those initiatives have making a relevant contribution to some kind of movement, I would say, which can be defined by ideas of solidarity, anti-racism, anti-discrimination, or in a broader sense, human rights. But the big question is, what social scope, what social importance can initiatives reach if they are small and local situated and have only a small outreach in the broader society? So I would say it's really important to say, how can we get support from governments and other institutions to reach a broader social scope, reach more people, to build up more professional competence and institutional force. Well, then I look at each one teach one. For example, as far as I know, they got not so little money from the government to make these Afro census, to build up information about the situation of people from African descent in Germany, and to make an impact on the public discussion on this ground. So I think we should not think in the idea civil society as a strict opponent to the government, but to build up a dialogue and some form of communication and cooperation to give to gain more resources for the activities in the of initiatives in civil society. And this leads me to another point. I think that might be, I'm not good informed about the situation in Turkey, but I'm good informed about the situation in Germany. And if I look at the German situation, I would say, if I look back 20 or 30 years, it was really clear when you engaged yourself for anti-racism, multiculturalism, human rights, you didn't get any support from the government. Because the government think the position of the government was to say, well, racism is not a problem in Germany nowadays. Germany is not a society of immigrants, but is the land of the Germans, and so on. But nowadays, the situation has changed. The government, or I would say a big part of the government, has accepted the idea that racism and discrimination are big problems in the society, and that we need societal efforts to overcome these problems. So we have a much better situation, I would say, in Germany, which allows us to get some support and to come in communication with the government and governmental institutions. My impression would be that the situation in Turkey nowadays is much different, because I would say academics, I know academics, I don't know people of civil society in Turkey, who engage for anti-racism and human rights are threatened by the government, not supported by the government. So we have a whole different situation in the countries. Perhaps I would make another point. You talked a little bit about the question of education and social inequalities. Well, and there was one aspect was to say, well, the problems are structures and mentalities and discourses within the pedagogical institutions which enforce inequalities, which enforce the reproduction of social inequalities within schools and other parts of the educational system. And I think it's a really important point to criticize structures, practices, ideologies of teachers and other people who are an element of the reproduction of social inequalities and social exclusion within the educational system. But I would not neglect the fact that for migrants, the problem is not only hostile or adverse attitudes and practices within the educational system, but a lack of support by the educational system to overcome the real problems. I make one example to make it clear. Well, when I did research the last years about the situation of young refugees, young male refugees, which came from Africa to Europe and to Germany as unaccompanied minors, it was really clear that a lot of them had a lack of school education. They had never attended school or attended school for 2 or 3 years in their life. They didn't know any European language. So they had a big problem of learning language skill to be able to get a qualified job or to apply for Berufsausbildung, heißt das wieder? Post-school education. You know what I mean? Training for qualified jobs.
Vocational
training.
Vocational training.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I always forget the word vocational training. So the problem is the problem is a lack of support, and we should, on the one side, look at the question how to overcome discriminations, but we should acknowledge that some part of migrants really need strong support by school for language education. They need good social work to deal with their experiences and to find out how to build up a life perspective in this society. And so I would say, well, we should not say this way, or there are two ways which are relevant and have their own importance. So I really think what Saraya Gomez named as empowerment, and the connection of empowerment, social work, good teaching, and anti-racist practice, that is a whole thing, and all these different elements should be connected together. Criticism of racism, good social work, good teaching, political empowerment shouldn't not be discussed as alternatives, but as aspects which should be dealt with in a certain balance.
I'm sorry that I have to interrupt. I see that the two organizers have come in and we have run out of time.
This was my last word. I would have come to an answer on.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for listening, and the time is over. I wish you a good time.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry I had to interrupt.
No
yeah, but it's just this annoying role of the moderator. So again, I would like to thank all of you for the wonderful presentations and the discussion, and the audience for their questions. So now I think I will hand the floor to Ellen and Joanna. Joanna for making the final farewell.
Well, thank you, Ayla, and thank you very much to all of you, all panelists of the last panel. We have, obviously not reached the end of the discussion. During the last 4 panels, we answered and discussed a lot of questions, but we also identified a lot of new questions and realized that we need actually much more time to discuss and to develop a more common ground, as Saraya put it. But unfortunately, we reached the end of this conference. So looking back on the last 1.5 days of the conference, we are particularly happy that our panelists and also their wide range of expertise allowed us to explore kind of a multidimensional perspective on each of the 4 panel topics. And these panels touched upon a variety of dynamics of exclusion in education systems, as well as inclusive approaches that address multiple forms of discrimination children face, especially children seeking protection in Turkey and the EU. And we think these and many more aspects that have been discussed in the last 1.5 days are crucial to being aware, broadening our horizons, learning from each other's approaches and strategies, connecting and supporting each other and building solidarity beyond borders.
Yes, and in this respect, we would especially like to thank the moderators for your well thought and well-placed moderations of all the panels. We also thank, of course, the discussions for your very reflective and insightful concluding remarks. Moreover, we thank our translator, who is probably not here anymore, but we still thank Oliver Kontne for their translations during the second panel today. And our special thanks goes to the Istanbul Policy Center team, under the coordination by Pelin Oyuz and Gulcihan Çiğdem. We would also especially like to thank Mirka Mutlu and Megan Gisklon from IPC, who accompanied us throughout the entire conference preparation.
Yeah, and we further express our sincere thanks to our hosts and funders, the Mercator Foundation and the Sabancı University, who made this conference in its present form possible. And we would also like to express our sincere thanks to our partners, the Migration Research Center at Koç University and the Feminist Autonomous Center for Research in Athens, who supported us and helped us to further expand our networks to include important actors from Greece and from Turkey. And a big thank you goes also to Burak Korkmaz and the children and young photographers of Sirkane Dark Room, who helped us to visualize and communicate this event.
Yes, and we would also like to thank you, of course, our virtual audience, for your great interest and vivid participation in the discussion. We sincerely hope that this joint conference may contribute to further net building and exchange of ideas, to jointly foster inclusiveness and transnational solidarity and counteract educational injustices together.
Yeah, and in order to foster this exchange in the future, we are pleased to inform you that we started a newsletter on our webpage in order to provide you with further information and enable further exchange. And you can see the link and address here. And yeah, we are very much looking forward to this exchange and to further collaborations. But now we wish all of you a restful and a nice evening. Thank you very much to all of you, and goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.